Welcome to Insider Exchange, the vodcast bringing you the honest and unfiltered opinions of experts on all things companies, markets, and investments, and occasionally some thoughts from some people that are in studio. I'm Jimmy Moyaha.
I'm Nicolette Mashile.
And I'm Simon Brown.
In Market Matters, we take a look at the Government of National Unity, the US data that's come out, commodities are suddenly running, and Hulaman gets an activist investor. Where do we start? Do we start locally or do we start offshore?
Local.
Okay, Government of National Unity finally decided to get itself together. Well, in part, I mean, we can only say so much, but the positivity around that and the fact that markets just started rallying off the back of, I suppose it's almost as if markets perceived this outcome better than what it would have been if the ANC didn't constitute a government of national unity on 40%.
Yeah, I think so, Jimmy. I mean, a couple of things. I mean, firstly, the some of the stuff, banks started railing beginning of June. Then we had and that was just post the election. Patently obvious that the ANC is not going to get a majority, not even close to majority, so they're going to have to talk to folks. I think there was worries as to who they would talk to, i.e. would it be DA, IFP, or would it be EFF, MK? And the market likes what they're seeing. Now, this past week, I mean, we're 1,000 points off the highs. Markets rallied. There's been a bit of, I suppose, perspective that, this is a 5-year journey. It can break down at any point in this journey. Let's be quite clear. But there is, coupled with 100 days of no load shedding, and then coupled with other things, like let's roll forward a year. We'll have lower rates, maybe as much as a full percent. We'll have lower inflation. Maybe the rand is stronger, so petrol prices are down. People are going to be drawing from their two-pot system and taking potentially billions out and spending it rather than saving it, which they should do. But suddenly, like the SA consumer, who's had 4 years of
rough.
Go back to the pandemic, and it's been a horror. Suddenly it's like there's actually some light out there.
Hey.
So we've seen it initially in banks, we've seen it in local retailers, but we've broadly, I mean, SA Inc. is suddenly saying, looky. And even, silly little stocks like Zeda, the car, not the agri.
Not the agri.
CMH, and these are stocks I follow and or
City
hold.
Lodge. City Lodge had done nothing for the longest time. Suddenly we're back above 4.50. I think it's up 4.5% for the month already, and we're like 5 days into the month. It's all sorts of, and I think I hear what you're saying is that it's a culmination of things that had put pressure on the consumer. And I think this is something I've spoken to David Shapiro about as well, about the fact that it's the South African market is resilient.
Yeah.
And this has been the ultimate test of resiliency is, can we survive everything breaking at the same time? And suddenly the market is like, you know what? We haven't given SA stocks enough credit in the past. But to be fair, there are some other stocks that are still struggling along. I mean, I think about Sibanye, which despite declaring a Section 189 this week, still rallied yesterday. How do you even make... Well, I suppose that's a commodities rally, right?
But let's quickly go back to the market. Our market is also cheap. I mean, the top 40 trailing PE is 13.5, dividend yield 3.5. This is historically cheap. The forward is even cheaper than that. And it's not just that there's positivity. There's positivity coupled with stocks that are... I mean, the number of stocks that are sitting on 5, 6, 7, 8 PEs, and to your point, surviving really, really tough conditions.
Do you know what I really like about the South African story as well is the fact that when you look at all of the companies and you look at all of the uncertainty that's happened, it's almost as if, much like, I think about something like gold, where you saw gold kind of decouple from the Bitcoin price movements or decouple from the rand or from the dollar in certain instances, right? The South African market's almost gotten to a point where it's like, you know what? There are external factors that do affect business confidence, but the business confidence side of it is just ticking along. I'm thinking about the Eskom, the 100 days situation. I spoke to Tsepo Gadima, independent energy analyst, and he was saying the fact that businesses and consumers, demand has come down. And he gave me some ridiculous stat about gigawatt hours. 3 gigawatt hours was what we expected to be from a demand. We're now down to 2.7 or something. We need to be at 3.8. Random numbers. But the point around that, was there's less reliance on Eskom. It's almost as if we were under such a stressful situation and so much pressure that the businesses, the consumers, everybody was like, let's just find the alternative. Let's just go with the alternative, whether it's building solar, even with the solar import tariffs that have now come in, whether it's that or just not having this affect us. And I think back to like Astral and that 2 billion rand, because that's the only number that Astral went on about. 2 billion rand cost of load shedding in one financial year. And then you look at Rainbow, who just listed on the JSE as well recently, and you're like, okay, is that, and perhaps we'll look at that. We'll look at Rainbow a little later around.
But that is the pressure from businesses. I mean, Shoprite made 8 billion profit and spent 1 billion on diesel.
That's it.
Now, okay, we're only 100 days in, but it means 250 million of that diesel price is now back in their bottom line. Now, sure, they've got to go pay Eskom. Let's be clear, Eskom is not cheap.
44% tariff hike coming.
But it's certainly just money dropping to the bottom line. The Mercantech Business CEO Confidence Index was up 13%. For 13 points for June. So it's only
amazing.
at 51.
It's amazing having electricity, right?
It does a lot for your psyche.
It does a lot for just,
and your
wow.
business. So there is a huge amount of positivity. Stuff is cheap. And if we roll it a year forward, consumer in a better place. I mean, I've been buying stuff left, right, and center.
How do you then compare it with the US picture? Because US, every time Jerome Powell takes the stage or says something, there's always this concern, US data, this about interest rates, and all of that. And I think we spoke about this as well, to say when the ECB started cutting ahead of everyone else, the global picture started looking very different. The global picture was, in the past, we're going to wait to see what the US does because they've been front running this whole conversation. Now everybody's like, we're going to wait to see how our economy does before we listen to the US. Obviously, South Africa is a bit different with the effect of the rand dollar and all of those sorts of things. But US data now, private jobs numbers came out on Wednesday. Today we're getting non-farms data. And unemployment data. And it's almost a sense that whether the data is good, bad, the market is saying it's either 1 or 2 rate cuts. We will not accept less than 1, which at some point we thought we might get less than 1.
Yeah. Well, and it's also, there's 2 things happening. We talk, the concentration of the top 10 stocks in the S&P 500 is 40%, which is a record. But they're not the .com fakies. These are, Microsoft, Amazon. I mean, they're making money, right? Meta, et cetera, et cetera. And the US economy, I was chatting with Craig Antonio from Enbro Capital, and he talks around a sort of a bear market by stealth. And if you go and look at Walmart, you go look at Johnson & Johnson, you look at the sort of, traditional economy stocks, they're not having a good year at all, which means maybe Jerome Powell is kind of, if we remove the top 10, what were the Mag 7, but then of course Tesla fell over and stuff.
Or just remove NVIDIA.
You take them out of the equation, the market's not so rocking. I mean, unemployment is expected to be 4%, which is a number we would kill for, but way up on the 3 point whatever they had a year 4%. Or so ago. So my sense is, and I know that the market's all spooked and like, it's going to be, only 1 cut. Look, even if it's only 1, I don't think he can cut in September because of the election. So if it's not July, then it's November, December. But he can sneak 2 in November, December. We can sneak 2 in as well.
I think that's what the American thing that what we often forget about this rate cut conversation is they don't necessarily have to sneak in 2 either. You can go straight for 50 basis points.
That's the other point.
Which might be a bit of a shock to the market, but it'll be a shock in the right direction, hopefully, I think, if we navigate.
So he doesn't have to necessarily do the 25s. And on the way up, remember, he did a 4%, which was the first 4% increase since, I think 1995 when Bill Clinton was president.
Oh, there's a throwback for a name.
Fun fact, he's younger than both the current presidents running, both the candidates.
As is Obama.
Obama's going to die.
He came
young.
in young, right?
Yes.
But yes, I saw that stat to say the guys that are running at the moment, of those fun facts, right? They did a little thing on, I think it was on X, where they put the 2 presidents and their ages, and they said things that have been invented or things that have come up since these presidents have been born. Basically, everything that they've witnessed.
It's everything.
Color TV, actual TV, it's everything.
Maybe it's not radio, but aside from that, it's everything.
It's everything. And you're like, wow, these guys are really old.
They are really old.
Is this why we're seeing a commodities rally? Because that doesn't make sense, right? For the longest time, gold was like, okay, gold versus dollar makes sense.
No, so gold rally makes sense, right? I think
Yeah.
there's two drivers to the gold rally. The one is, well, apart from just, gold and inflation and all of that stuff. But the other was the Russian invasion of Ukraine, when suddenly they lost access to their dollar reserves. And I think a lot of people were like, whoa, checky that. And you look who's been buying: Turkey, China, Indonesia. Suddenly they realize those reserves are like, let's get some proper stuff we can stick in the basement type of thing. And then I can't help wondering as well, just the sort of, Le Pen in France and sort of right move in a lot of elections that we're seeing, maybe spooking folks as well. I
think the election thing is it almost makes me feel like I'm glad we got our election out of the way, because we can now sit back and be like, oh, you guys are in for it now, especially with the US and all the other ones coming up.
But palladium 3 weeks ago was trading 870. It's now 140 odd. That's a chunky move.
That's what I want to look at, right? Is that move because markets are looking at something, or is it just because the craze that was EVs and cleaner energies and all of that seems to have died down quite a bit as well.
So that's an interesting point. And certainly there is a die down. Look at Tesla, second quarter of reducing units shipped, etc. But I think we're seeing a couple of things in the EV space. The early adopters are done. Right? In the last 10 years, if you wanted an EV and you had the money, you've gone and you've bought it and you were the early adopter. Onto the second gen adopters, people who live in a flat, like me. Where do I charge my EV? Do I have to run a cable out the 10th floor all the way down to the ground? Range anxiety.
My building doesn't have EV parking bays or EV charging stations built into it, so it's not practical.
So I got to sneak over to Standard Bank and pretend I'm there to visit somebody. And then I think also we're seeing a move in hybrid. So I think the whole idea that we were all going to be, EV
non-combustion is just not a thing.
It's just not going to happen. Now, are we going to be using less EVs, less combustion? We
Possibly,
are. We can see that. But I don't think to the level that perhaps had been thought.
But I also think there's a generational component to it, right? There was an interesting study about Gen Zs, or the generations that are now coming into the age of maturity beyond 18 or 18 to 35s or whatever, the current youth of the world, lives for experiences, lives for now, lives for moments, isn't looking towards preservation and looking towards the future. That logic suggests that people will then, I'd rather travel than buy an EV. I'd rather go. I'd rather pay for exactly rather than have a car in general. Never mind an EV. Just cars are so expensive. I'd rather put the money towards a holiday or something that I can actually enjoy. And now you're seeing that demand might not be where people thought.
But we also need to put it in perspective. Platinum for how long is this chart? 5-year, 3-year chart has been pretty much 830 to 1100. So platinum's kind of been range bound. Palladium's bouncing off the bottom. These might just be fake. This might not actually be.
Might just be a retest of highs, and then market comes and settles down again.
Gold, however, is doing it proper. Gold is held. I held gold for like the first time in my life, and it still just feels weird. So there's a little sort of, since about, April, it's been kind of in a channel up to that all-time high of 24, 25, down to the lows of around 23-ish. It's kind of been sticking in that channel for now, and it's quite comfortable sitting there. And at that price point, man, gold miners are making money. GRD's making like $800 an ounce at that point.
And what I love about the mining side of it now is, as these prices remain elevated, these guys don't have to do anything. Goldfields, DRD Gold,
nothing.
They have to do nothing. All they have to do is maintain your exact same production levels. You're achieving a higher sales number. Your costs aren't going up, and your bottom line just looks rosy. We saw this like a couple of years ago with when gold started its initial rally and moved up and everything. The miners were like, we didn't increase production, but we made a whole lot more money.
Yeah. And it is that. And that also goes back to what we're seeing in the PGM space, which is, you mentioned the new retrenchments coming out of Sibanye. We've seen shafts being closed, which is your classic bottom of cycle. The trick is, how long does that bottom of cycle last? But you start taking supply out of the equation, and at some point that pushes the price higher, and then you've got prices, and then all the supply comes rushing back in.
Hulaman, activist investor. This is nuts now. Everybody just wakes up. If you've got money and you decide to go and change things, you go, and we say the Hulaman thing is one thing, but I'm now thinking about the Renigen conversation as well and all other conversations. You now see people saying, we don't agree with what you're doing. We want to effect change. Why would you do that? Why would you take your money, go put it into something else?
You can make money.
Fair enough.
We've got to credit Mark Hassenfuss for this because I'd never. So the chap's name, let me go find his name. He's got a wild name, and he came in and Flocker Skutter picked up 6.7% in Hulaman, and Mark Hassenfuss spoke to him in this week's Financial Mail, and says that the chap is just like absolutely saying that these guys are just like they're asleep at the wheel, and I'm paraphrasing, not quoting. And he's bought 7%, and he says, look, I'll just keep on buying until I run out of money or they start talking to me. But this chap's in the metal business, in the metal trading
How does that work? I'll keep buying until you either start listening to me or I run out of money. But if I get to a point where I run out of money, but I then own X amount of your company, it then means you have to talk to me because I'm a shareholder.
Well, and he says, and this is the quote from Mark, he says that the victor said it was aloof and arrogant, not enough skin in the game, implementation, discipline at Hulaman, etc. And he's obviously looked at a company and said, you know what, this thing should be worth multiples more, and I buy a stake and I poke them, and ultimately I get onto the board if need be, and we'll see some things happen.
That's crazy.
Yeah, the share price hasn't done a heck of a lot. The share price is like, meh. But we're not very used to activist shareholders in this country. Actually, I take that back. And then the share price was down at $3 and change. Back in April. Now it's $4, so 25% in a few months.
Okay,
it's not bad. It's not Nvidia, but
it's definitely not Nvidia.
Nothing's
Nvidia. I don't think we'll get to an Nvidia anytime soon. Well, that's it. Market matters for the week. And we move on to the deep dive. This is obviously, as the name suggests, a segment where we take a look at a sector, a stock, a trend, anything that we get our hands on, and we unlock the secrets to that, hopefully, and see if we can make the most of it. I thought for the first one, well, not the first one. I mean, we've done this before, but I thought for this one it would be extra special because the guest joining us in studio for this one is Petri Redelinghuys. He's the founder of Herenia Capital, which turns 8 on this day as we record this episode. So congratulations. Hope you like our gift.
I got a fancy balloon.
Hope you like the gift.
I want to see you take it home on your motorbike. I want pictures.
Yes, we need pictures. We'll take pictures before you, or as you get on the bike. We definitely want to see this. But today we're looking at financial stocks because apparently that's been all the rage. Everybody wants to get a financial stock. Do we want to take the banks from left to right and then kind of look at the other ones afterwards? I'm trying to think of where to start, but really everything's just been rallying, right? So the government of national unity gets announced and then everybody's like, oh, okay, so this is the way South Africa is moving forward. And suddenly international investors are like, hey,
we're interested.
How are you doing? They weren't interested a week before.
I want to start this. I want to speak first because I need to preface it. But firstly, just to say from the lows of 22 April, which was at around 15,700, we're now almost 20,000. I mean, it's been a proper run. And that's the FINI 15 in its entirety. I was bearish banks this year because I'm worried about impairments. Typically, when interest rates start to come down, banks start to struggle. And they'd really done some knockout
defaults risk of defaults had gone up. A lot of them had given provisions and stuff.
And I was completely and absolutely right until the 1st of June.
Everything was great until we saw something different.
Now I'm wrong.
Look, I think if I could just add in here, I think being wrong in this case is very good.
No, I'm not.
It's the best time to be wrong, right?
Don't get me wrong. And banks are running, and I mean, again, why they're running. We were speaking in the previous segment, Jimmy. We were talking about the consumer who, let's roll forward a year, is going to have interest rates % down potentially. Petrol, if the rand is stronger, looking better. Money out of their two-pot systems. What was I can't remember the fourth one. Lower inflation at maybe
actual electricity.
For 100 days or 101 days.
100 days of actual electricity.
Consumers sitting there, sitting a bit prettier. And our banks are less cheap than they were a little while ago. But I mean, I still
mighty cheap. I think what's interesting for me is if you see, and this is maybe not just necessarily the bank specifically, but if you look at what some of the research notes are coming out from like the HSBCs and the big institutions, right? Everybody's going, So South Africa is super undervalued. We're going overweight.
Yeah.
And it's
And they're going
When-
from
when-
underweight to overweight.
when
Yeah,
JP
exactly,
Morgan
and there's
did
no
that,
middle of the road.
I remember when JP Morgan did that. Was that last week or this week? I think it was last week.
yeah.
And they went. They literally didn't go neutral. They didn't
they
go
just
slightly
went,
over. They were just like, no,
straight
we're,
overweight.
we're there. We're
So
all
now
in.
that leads to, and obviously there's a bit of a lagging effect here, but think about how much we've lost in terms of outflows out of the JSE over the
Yeah.
last 2-3
Yeah.
years.
Billions.
You know,
Hundreds of
massive
billions.
amounts of money. Let's imagine that 10% of that wants to be back by December.
Right.
It's,
And then
there's flows.
So
coming.
10%. So 10% by December. But then when global conditions recover and global markets start to rally, emerging markets will rally too.
Exactly.
And we're already on the momentum of having been
there's
having
that,
hit rock
and
bottom.
we're probably the cheapest out of all the emerging markets,
And the most
because we've
stable.
been the one that's been sort of with the most negative sentiment. towards it.
Yes.
So now, to bring it back to the banking context, it's almost like we know, and we've been saying this for a long time, the banks are the bellwether for the South African economy. So international investors are more interested in our banks.
And when the foreigners arrive, they can't go and buy Hulaman or CMH or
They're not
or
interested in the small
Purple.
caps. They want
They need-
stability,
And if
I
you
suppose.
remove the jewelers, like the miners, put them completely aside.
Which commodities is risk?
Remove the Naspers, the processors, the Richmonds, all of those type of stocks. What's left? The banks, couple of retailers.
Mr. Price, who's run as well.
Yeah, and there's not that much left for them to buy. That little middle segment of SA Inc. is quite narrow.
But they also enjoy. They don't take risk in in the SA market, right? Everybody comes in and says, yes, we want exposure to South Africa, but we want the safest exposure to South
is true.
Africa.
This is
And
true.
banks are the safest exposure because you're not affected by commodities pricing. You're not affected by other things. So definitely one of those things where they're like, oh no, we like you, but we don't like you enough to take that much risk,
we're not ready to buy, I don't know, pick a small stock, small cap,
You can pay.
Pick and pay.
Zita, you were talking about
which I never thought would say is a small. You don't think about Pick and Pay as a small cap stock, Doesn't.
I'm not sure. I mean, Pick and Pay, we might be doing a disservice. Let me haul up.
I think they were 25, 26 rand. I'll pull it up as well. While we do that,
market cap is maybe 13.
are we up to
billion.
we were at 9 at some point, so we've recovered quite a bit. We're up to 26 rand, 26.60 or so. On the banks, all the banks are now. I mean, Capitec all-time highs. Discovery pushed almost 20% last month. The only one that's really lagging behind is Absa, and obviously they gave us an update recently which suggested single-digit
update.
growth, which wasn't a good update. But would there still be appetite if we're at all-time highs? I mean, Capitec is an expensive bank, and they're not doing a share.
I don't know
bundling.
how to answer the Capitec story.
I've
I think
asked
too
Harry.
many have died trying to be negative Capitec, standing in front of the bus. So it's overvalued. It's XYZ. It's not going to
Look,
stop.
they've got a brilliant ROE. Their cost to income is sort of maybe low to mid 40s compared to the other banks, low to mid 50s. Their ROE is better than any of them. But that bank's 6 times price to book. First Rand's 2, Absa's 1, Nedbank, Standard Bank 1.4ish.
So this is and it's not as if they're a bad bank. They're not. They're an exceptionally well-run bank. And I asked Harry at some point, are you going to do a stock split? Because that's the only logical thing I see here. It's not about undervaluing a company or whatever. It's just purely making the company more accessible. And they're like, yeah, no, we don't need to. We don't have a reason to. It's almost like a Naspers story where if you want the stock, you'll buy the stock. If you don't want the stock, then
Don't buy it.
Then don't buy it. But they perform exceptionally well. And I think I like someone like Discovery as well. I remember when Discovery came down to, I think it was below 120 at about 110 towards 100 Rand. I looked at that. I was like, this is the cheapest thing ever. And this was before they rolled out the new lending, the revolving and the
Because
home
when
loans and
NHI
all
was
of
being announced.
Exactly. When NHI was announced, the thing came right down and I was like, this is a steal at 110 Rand. I don't know if it's going to come. I didn't see it coming below 100, honestly. It just didn't make sense. I thought that was very, very negative or very bearish on it. And I was right. I think we didn't even get close to 100. We stopped at 107 Rand. We're now back at 140 Rand. And it was around the time, Simon, you were calling Mr. Price to say you've just exited your Mr. Price. And following that, this thing's now north of 200 as well.
No,
So
I
banks.
just entered Mr.
Oh, you're back.
I would now back. I've been Mr. Price since January.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, lovely. So what are we getting into banks? Are we not? Are we?
Disclaimer: we are in a bank.
Oh, we are in banks. There we
The
go.
one that we bought was Absa Bank, and we bought
Because it's trading at a good price, right? For me down between 158 or even 155 down to 150. I kind of see that as or even down to 140. I see that as a reasonable kind of number, because last month we touched north of 180.
Yeah. So I mean, there was a big fall on the 27th of June. So that is the day that
the trading
that's-
update.
That's when we
Yeah.
when we bought into it. So we took a double size position that day. We bought, and then it fell more, and we bought some more. As one does.
As one does.
No, it was a horror trading update, and when you compare it to FSR, First Round, who basically said, yeah, things were better than we thought. But that's what ABSA does. ABSA always just disappoints. It's their modus operandi. Don't argue with it. So I'm liking banks. I'm not in banks because I was bearish on them. But I'm keeping it simple. I'm just watching that the Satrix Finney, and
Are you in asset managers, Simon? Because that's another component of the financial side that was Coronation, obviously the Coronation thing was winning that court case with SARS. That's a 700 million rand windfall. That's a win in anyone's book, right? But asset managers as well. I mean, just speaking to the likes of Hendrik du Toit at 91, they'd been waiting for those inflows. And Petri, you said those inflows might want to come in before December, which obviously from an asset management point of view puts a completely different color on things. And you think about someone like Alex Forbes that's sitting on $1 billion in cash, and the stock's trading at what, 7 rand?
Well, now if you take our local institutions have to start chasing stocks, and the international institutions start chasing stocks. So I think from the international perspective, that flow might want to come in sort of before the end of the year, right? Well, I guess there's a lot of stuff also because there's still a US election.
Yeah, that's going to be
on
another
the
thing.
cards, and that might change the mood completely. But I do think that some of the cash that we've lost, or some of the investment that we've lost locally, will want to come back. I think that the stable government situation is definitely a massive positive.
Simon was saying he doesn't know how long it's going to be stable for, and I think
but
no
it
one.
is stable
no
for
one
now.
can
It's
change
stable
the
for
rules.
now,
Stable
right?
for now.
It's stable
And to the
for
point,
now.
take a look at Coronation, for example. Market goes up 10%, boom. Their earnings go up 10%. Their dividend goes up 10%. It's carrying a 2 rand special dividend from beating SARS. They can suddenly start perhaps getting some performance fees coming through. I mean, these are
Turns around quite quickly.
These are
eh?
alpha stocks to market. So yeah, I mean, so I've got bids in all over the place, and I'm just not getting hit. But I'm patient because you know what's going to happen. One day, some minister or government official is going to stand up, and the whole world's going to be like, "Oh no, the GNU's dead."
Yes.
And you know what?
And
GNU's,
markets are going to die for that
and
day.
if you've looked at a GNU, man, those things just look dead anyway. Like you look at a GNU sleeping, it looks.
It's an animal. There's an actual animal called the GNU.
Yes.
It's not we're not referring to our politicians as animals. Those listening to us, there is an actual animal that's called a GNU, and there is also a government of national unity, which just so happens to share the same abbreviation.
GNU is actually a coalition, but let's not get splitty about that. Anyway, the point is that I'm not chasing this because this is a 5-year story. Yes, there's going to be. I mean, we've seen a massive.
You're going to get retracements.
You know, we've got 20% moves in many of these stocks already. We're going to get retracements. We're going to get panic. We're going to get end of world. And much like Petri, when ABSA comes out with a horror update, there's your
That's where you double down. That's where you get in.
Yeah.
Wait. I love it. Okay, so we've looked at asset managers. We've looked at banks. Insurers. Do we even... Because that's been... Aside from the natural disasters that South Africa has gone through, are we upbeat about insurers?
They're so hard to...
They're so hard to read. It's one of those things where you're like, the amount of effort it's going to take for me to
you know
look
what-
into you as an insurer, I'll just go buy
So what
something
I'm going
else.
to do, I'm going to cheat. Keith McLachlan, smart oak, he likes momentum.
Okay.
That's all I'm going to say.
There we go.
because insurers are, so they're all cheap. But the other thing, as David Shapiro will constantly remind me, is where are they growing their business? They're stealing from each other.
That's it. So there's no new growth in the insurance sector. It's
Just stealing from
Let's
A
be honest,
to B.
that's the story for the entire financial services sector of South Africa for the
This
last
is
5 years.
This is completely
Fair enough.
true. And here's
Fair
a fun
enough.
thing. I mean, if we just don't have, I was trying to find out what load shedding impact is on GDP, and it could be as much as 1.5 or 2% necessarily. So if our 100 days of no load shedding becomes 400 or 500, with a little bit of stage 2 here and there, because
Did you say 500 days of no load shedding?
well, I mean, but
Wow, you're ambitious.
no, but with some little bits of stage 2 here and there. But none of this 4 and 6 for relentless.
all right.
Remember, no power for 12 hours a
Okay,
day.
so stage 1, fine. Stage 2,
little
kind of
bitly that and that sort of
survivable.
stuff.
Yeah.
We start hitting that. We've got this weird thing happening. Growth.
It's It's a concept we've become. It's a concept that is now foreign to us.
You youngins, I'm old enough to remember the early 2000s.
There was a time where we had economic
Mbeki,
growth.
Manuel and Mboweni, and we were having 5% growth. Manuel had budget surplus. He was stand up and reduce your
5%
tax.
growth. 5% growth.
Uh.
National Treasury in the budget this year forecasted an average of 1.6 over the next 3 years. And we're talking 5%.
In 1 year.
Wow.
Yeah. So that starts to happen, and then suddenly stuff is happening.
And
We
then
don't
the
swear on this
SA
podcast,
picture.
though.
Well, you can.
Okay.
We will
I
bleep it
wasn't
out. We'll figure that out. Yeah, so actually that raises a very interesting point is then if we're using that logic to extrapolate, Petri, that means everything's just going to go up. At some point, everything at least 5-10% on what we are currently sitting at. Because if markets are moving now and our growth is forecast at barely 0.5%, when the country is actually a functional emerging market country contributing towards its global peers or towards global growth, that means more investment, more infrastructure spending. Everything else has that ripple effect. The same way, as you said, it had the ripple effect in the opposite direction where we came under pressure for the last 4 years. Then financial stocks are still going to rally again.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you
That's
look at the
madness.
top 40 index or the all-share index, whatever it was, hit all-time highs yesterday.
So here's my call for...
And the reality is, sorry, if you compare us just the two graphs to each other, the US versus where we are. The US, okay, we made an all-time high yesterday for the first time
since 2023.
since 2023. Compare that to the US market.
That's been running.
It's been running and running and running and running.
NASDAQ
We
is
are
hitting almost
so
20,000
far
points at
behind.
some point, and it's
Yeah.
just...
But so here's my big call. If this GNU holds,
the government, not the animal.
if this coalition holds for 5 years,
Yes.
my minimum call on top 40 is 150,000, and I reckon, which is only, no, but let's be clear, that's only 15% a year. It's doubling. It's only 15% a year. Minimum is 150. So just go buy the Satrix 40.
To give you an idea of perspective here, over the last 5 years, the S&P 500 is up 84%, and the top 40 is up 41%. So
Okay.
they've doubled our performance.
Yeah. And
So
can-
we can essentially from here rally another 40%, and
Yes.
then only we've caught up to the rest of the world.
Yes.
That's the level of underperformance that we've had. So if we can,
Well, I mean,
sort our
to be
government
to be fair, aside from the government, we've also had 16 years of load shedding. Eh?
Yeah.
We're suddenly 100 days out, but we had 16 years of like
I mean, we are Stockholm
inconsistency
syndrome, hey?
and
and let's
100
be fair,
days
we're
and-
not out. We're
we're not out of the woods. We're feeling
My biggest worry is that as our economy starts to grow, we bump into no electricity.
yes growth. Okay, too much growth, gotta come down. Okay, we have enough electricity for this much growth, but not this much growth. That could be an interesting take.
Because that was
on
an
it.
interesting stat. Actually, it's like South Africa had the lowest emissions. You know, we smashed
Oh
our
yes,
emissions
yes,
targets
yes,
or
yes,
whatever
yes,
it was.
But we did that because we
couldn't
didn't have
produce power,
electricity,
yeah.
not because we worked hard towards that. Which was the other electricity conversation we were having a little earlier before Petri joined us. That the demand is actually forecast to go down from what it was, and an energy analyst told
there's
me
a mix
this.
of things there. I think also if you look at, for example, we're talking about asset managers, a lot of them have lost AUM, assets under management, right? And I think a reason for that is all of that stuff's gone onto people's roofs. Roofs. How do you say that word? Roofs.
Roofs. On top of the house.
The plume.
Yeah, the
there we
part
go.
that keeps the rain outside.
There we go.
So a lot of that has gone on there as solar
Well,
panels and
supposed to keep
batteries
the
and
rain
inverters and whatever else. And those setups are bloody expensive.
They are, and now there's a new tariff on there, and apparently,
All sorts. There was a tax rebate on some of them, and
Yes,
tax
yes,
rebate
yes.
and tariff.
Yeah,
it's
so-
net effect zero. But anyway,
Whatever.
but people are buying them. People are essentially
As they are
liquidating,
with financial stocks.
investments in order to become energy independent. And I can tell you now, it's maybe not a very nice topic, but the next thing is water.
no,
Yeah.
absolutely.
If you
absolutely
really
look
wanna
at
make a lot
the
of money,
yeah.
we need to list JoJo tanks.
Individual JoJo tanks
Not
with water in them.
Exactly, and those little purification tablets.
yeah.
I mean,
That's crazy.
That's the next thing, right? And I think what's going to happen is more and more of our companies
Will adapt.
Will have to adapt.
And South Africans as well. I think that's the other thing we were talking about, the resilience and all of that is when we're pushed to the point where you don't have an alternative or you don't have another option but to adapt, the outcome of that adaptation is a really good thing. I mean,
yeah.
it's almost as you're not, because when we adapt, it's not adapting for the now. It's adapting as if this is my new permanent
okay, this is the
normal,
no- yeah,
which
this is-
permanently almost solves the problem. It's not like I'm adapting and then I'll go back in 6 months. No,
How do I
it's
get a
how do I get
temporary electricity solution? It's like, no, how do I go off the grid?
how do I
Don't wanna
completely
do this
solve
again.
the problem, which is a good thing for us. That kind of mindset and stuff is good for our companies and it's good for investments in general.
Comes back to the earlier point. Our companies are resilient.
Hey, I'm tired of that word, eh? You know when people use the word resilient, it almost makes me feel like someone's out there saying, you guys are God's strongest soldiers and therefore you get the toughest tests. We're tired of that, eh?
Yeah, we don't want
We don't want
tests.
that.
You know what?
Can
We
we
want
just,
champagne and Boerewors
can we just have a
rolls.
soft life?
Yeah.
Markets bring us a soft life. Financial stocks bring us a soft
And lower
life.
taxes.
And lower taxes. There we go. Petri's onto something. That's another conversation for another day. But I think we are out of time for this one. Thanks so much. Thanks, Petri. Thanks for coming through. Happy birthday again.
Thank you.
We hope you
Yeah,
like your
8
birthday
years,
present.
eh? So Mourinho's made it 8 years.
Investor Insights. Always a good segment. Always the end of the aim of what we want to do with the segment is highlight what other people are seeing, share our thoughts on what other people might be seeing, and sometimes whether we agree or not, just discuss what's happening out there. And I mean, part of the Investor Insights is being able to then also shed some light on some serious matters. Perhaps let's start with the serious matters. Let's start with some of the warnings and some of the things that are out there. Nicolette, what have you seen this week?
FSCA, money muling. I think we take it for granted. I don't think people actually understand that you cannot move money for someone else.
And
It's like drug muling, guys.
It's plain English. It's simple terms, right? And I think that's when you label it money muling, suddenly it has a name and a corporate identity and all of that.
You mean, sorry, I'm just going to interrupt you.
Yeah, Petri's
People
back.
are-
Petri's seconded into this as well. He stuck around for a bit because it's his birthday.
So hang on. People are taking duffel bags of cash.
No.
How is this working?
That is the wrong political office.
Oh, sorry.
Money muling. The FSCA has put out a warning saying that as an individual, you can't then go and take on funds on behalf of a third party for the purposes of moving that. So Jimmy phones Petri, says, Petri, there's going to be a transfer of 50,000 Rand that I need to deal with. I don't have the facilities to deal with it. Can I have this institution or this third party pay it to your account and then you pay it to Nicolette on my behalth? Now, you as Petri are just like, oh, I'm just helping out a friend. There's no problem there. And then I say to you, look, it's 50K, but I might let you keep 5K of it because it only. But even if that part of the arrangement isn't there,
Now this is called laundering.
I was about to say, it just opens you up to washing machine.
That's it. Even
Basically
outside
washing.
of you taking a cut, let's say you don't take a single cent of it. What happens there is the paper trail doesn't link
Doesn't
back to
include you
me,
at all.
and
So it's
I'm the
income
one.
for you that's not being.
That even if it's not
disclosed or
income,
whatever.
even if I owe somebody money or I need to, the point is you're facilitating a transaction that doesn't relate to you, that you shouldn't be involved in at all. And if that opens you up from a tax perspective, you can't confirm or you can't evidence that
think
I'm the one that did that.
What a lot of people did, and it's not so popular anymore, but because the Bitcoin arbitrage isn't as good as it was. Thanks, big institutions.
Thanks, SEC.
Yeah. But no. Other small, well, not as big as, but there are two companies in particular that started doing arbs for people and
100%.
they
They have crypto licenses now, to
made
be
a lot
fair.
of money in the process. But the arb was great, man. 1.7%. Anyway, what people would do is they would run out of single discretionary allowance
Yes.
for the year.
Yes.
So then I'd give you, a couple
Yes.
hundred K and let you do it for
That's
me.
it.
And
That's
that
it.
is essentially what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Because that's like
Well,
illegal
Can
in
I
many
tell you
ways.
though
right?
what companies are doing? Big companies in South Africa find the process of onboarding vendors onerous, right? It takes too long. They want to hire you right now.
Yes.
Then they get someone else
Who's
who's already
already-
onboarded. And I don't know now if that falls under.
That would be interesting as well because
Yeah.
that is an efficiency. But is that I suppose from a money muling point of view, it was in an effort to tackle illicit activities because we're on
Absolutely.
that grey list, the
Absolutely.
naughty list, and all of
Yeah.
that.
Oh,
So
since the grey listing, the regulation has gotten. There's been a lot of
Tight.
changes.
Yeah.
speaking
Really
of
hammer
that, speaking of that, you say that, Petri, and Nicolette, you're off to Namibia when we're done here.
Yes.
Don't be so happy. Enjoy the holiday, but remember,
Good work.
no, effective the 30th of September. It was supposed to be June, but now it's been pushed to September. Effective 30 September, EFT payments.
Okay.
So if you are working in Namibia and someone then sends you money, it's no longer a domestic payment. You are now in the realm of international payments. That is a new thing.
Because we had the
But is that not
Yes.
for all the...
It's for the CMA countries.
Yes.
So the common monetary area being Eswatini,
Yes.
Lesotho, and Namibia.
So with all of them?
All of them. In the past, when you used to, and this particularly applies to you because of the amount of travel you do, right?
Yeah.
In the past, when you used to go and work or do a gig in Namibia, and a Namibian entity would pay you, the South African banking system in the common monetary area would read that as a domestic payment. So it's as if a South African business has paid you.
yes.
Now it's going to be an international transfer. It is no longer going to be, it's an offshore payment. It's now going to come via SARB with the offshore regulations and everything, because that CMA agreement and all of that, that adjustment for EFT payments has been changed now, effective 30 September. So that's why I said enjoy it while it lasts, because now it's going to complicate your life.
Yeah, it's just going
Now
to
you
make
gotta
trade
do a balance of
difficult.
payments form and
Yes, now you gotta, it's now as if someone is paying you out of America. You got to declare where the income is, blah, 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 blah. And all of the headaches that come with that from an international perspective. I don't yet know how it's going to affect, I suppose it would affect single discretionary allowances, as Petri mentioned, in the same way. So if you need to send some money out to Namibia, for example, then it's no longer just a standard bank to standard bank deposit.
when you swipe your credit card in another country, the bank reports that to.
It's an international transaction.
That
Yes.
uses your SDA. Yeah.
Yes. But just because you're out of the country, that's why when you leave the country, you have to phone the bank. Hey, I'm
And
going to
tell
be
them, yeah.
exactly. But they read that as a foreign transaction.
No, I'm
Even
stressed
online.
so
about
now,
this trade
you
because-
pouring petrol in Windhoek is an international transaction. In the past, it was considered a domestic
But you
transaction.
got to buy R1 million worth of petrol before you have to start. Right?
Yeah, so you're okay. You're okay.
I'm okay, but I do books in
And you
in
do
those,
a lot of
I do a lot of
CMA
work
traveling.
actually.
Yes, yes.
So that's
so
gonna be very interesting.
heads up on that.
It'll help with my
gonna
pricing,
be,
though.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I don't know how that's going to affect rates now, because if you think about something like the Botswana and Pula, which was historically slightly better, slightly stronger. Same with, I think from Namibia's perspective, the Namibian dollar. Now, those are no longer being pegged at 1-to-1 for those kinds of transactions. So now do we delve into the realm of
it's a bit,
It is, but yes,
And
effectively,
also, I wonder
nightmare.
now if all of these things have to now go through forex dealers.
they must.
So, for
It's
example,
an international transaction now.
You know what I mean? Like you
Yeah.
go to, like we use Capitec for,
Yeah.
like FCA accounts or whatever,
Yes.
right? So you can send money in and out of South Africa, and you do a BOP form. And
Yeah,
you
yeah, yeah.
do a currency
that's
conversion and
effectively-
the whole thing. And
So now you have to do that for a payment to Eswatini.
but if can you still use rands though?
That's, you probably could, but they'll be converted.
But you'll have
but now
still do an international
that's
SWIFT
it.
payment.
International SWIFT payment
So what happens now to platforms like your MTN Momo?
that have, well, now MTN Momo is a cross-border.
Yeah.
It's a cross-border transaction.
Yeah.
They're clear about the fact that this is now a
They've been
cross-border
doing that
transaction.
cross-border transactions for a while though. Right?
Yeah. So I think guys like MTN Momo and that would have an authorized dealer with limited authorities approval from the SARB, an ADLA
So
license.
directly from there.
Yeah, so an ADLA license allows you to do these sorts of remittances and all of that. But the payment is now no longer going to be a
Domestic
rand,
payment. I
a
get
domestic
that.
payment, and that's the big thing, I suppose.
It's going to be quite interesting because it's going to throw off all our pricings, and how do you regulate that?
How do you? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's going to be mad. But I thought I'd give you a heads up. I
Thanks.
thought that would be
I
worthwhile.
appreciate it.
And there's so much that can go on the wall. There's so much, especially when we look at, for whatever reason, right? So you put them on a wall. It's, do we like it? Do we not like it?
Yeah.
There's so much that's been moving. It almost feels overwhelming. And Petri and I were just talking about this a little earlier, that some things are ridiculously cheap. Some things, even though they are not cheap, are still worthwhile to get into. And
Yeah.
what do we have? What do we have?
I want to start off with, I mean, we're looking at 10 billion people in the world in the next couple of years. Let's talk about food.
Okay.
Astral.
Foods. Oh,
I'm going to cheat you. Can I cheat? Can I look at charts first?
Yeah. Let's pull up a chart. Now, I'm pulling up a chart as well while we do this. Astral Foods. I remember
In general, I like.
Yeah, I remember the 2 billion rand load shedding. That's the only number that sticks in my head. The stock did 16% last month. It's up 4% this month.
I think these are misleading numbers. To be
Why?
fair.
Why do you say that?
Because everything off a low base. Looks
Yes, no,
amazing,
right?
right?
Exactly. Very right. Very right to
So
say
from 1 to 2
is 100%
like
gain.
100%.
100% exactly.
And
And if you think
it was
about
100 at one point.
yeah, so if you compare, if you have to look at it year on year, right? So you look at August of last year, it lost 20% when I think it was around the time the 2 billion rand would have been announced, the hit that they were taking. So it came down to 140 rand, very low base. Now we're back at 170 rand, which is August last year's pricing. At this point, I want to see if it'll break above 170, right? I wouldn't put it at my coolest point. I'm kind of
Is it in the middle?
I'm kind of neutral
Like in
about
limbo?
it. I don't like getting into stocks while they're running. I'm one of the. I prefer to wait
Enough, you
until
wanted
something.
to buy it off that 135 level. So I just opened it. It's kind of I just opened a chart and and I got a range from 135 to 190.
Yeah,
And we're in the middle of that range now.
That's it.
So from a
squarely-
trading perspective, there's no high probability set up here because you're in the middle of the range, right? But from an investment perspective, if we think
Long
that, hey,
term.
we're actually going to have electricity for a little while and the government's national unity is going to be a bit stable, then I don't see why not. It's above the 200-day moving average.
So, it's on
So
your
we're
wall.
neutral.
All right, neutral on
I
it.
think we're neutral on it.
Okay, neutral.
Bitcorp?
Bidcorp. Haven't looked at that. Let me see.
Oh.
Bidcorp. Let's see.
I mean, Africa is there.
Off the bat, I'd say buy. Hey?
You're buying.
Yeah, I'm very bullish South Africa at this stage. I think it's a bit. I think I'm going to say buy to everything.
Okay.
I think that we've been in a space where we've looked at
How
the outside world is the
how
answer to
strong
our
a
problems
buy
for a
though?
long-
So if you are on buy, how strong a buy are you at the moment? 'Cause
well,
I'm
disclaimer:
seeing-
we do not have it in our portfolio.
No.
So
This is someone else has got this in their portfolio, or someone might be thinking about having
getting
that
it,
in their
yes.
portfolio. I think we're in the middle of a 52-week
Do you know
range.
what I like about this thing? Just looking at this, if you look at March 2022, R3 dividend.
Mhm.
Then you look at September 2022, R4 dividend. Then you look at March 23, R4.40 dividend. And then you look at September 23, R5 dividend.
So you're doing
Then you
interim.
look
They're doing
at
interim
March
dividends.
dividend this year, R5.25.
Okay, so we're
what are you
expecting
seeing
that
at?
the full year dividend will then encompass a higher.
Well, the dividend is growing.
Okay,
And I
so
think
then
the dividend growth rate with a low debt to equity is
Yeah.
probably one of the biggest or most important metrics you can look for fundamentally
Yeah.
in a company. So the dividend here is growing. I like that.
well, the
That's
nice
a good
thing,
stock.
the nice thing about our wall is that we've got a segment or we've got a section of it for dividend growth or dividend stocks.
Yeah.
Let's put it there.
All right, speaking about dividend stocks, British American Tobacco.
Oh, BAT.
I'd buy.
You're buying everything. Petri.
This is like, listen, I'm putting it on my cool wall. It's coming on. Let's buy it.
You're just
I'm
buying
gonna be that
everything.
guy. Yeah.
You're buying everything.
Just collecting for a couple of reasons. I think that it's kind of recently just broken above a 200-day moving average. So I think we have a trend changing scenario. From a very long term perspective, it is technically in an uptrend since sort of the beginning of 2019. It's managed to make higher lows and higher highs over the very long. I mean, it's over a 5-year period almost.
You didn't see a change in consumers.
I'm gonna agree
Going
with.
with wellness, man.
Nah, I'm gonna agree with Petri. It's bounced off 550. It's gonna move up. Consumers. Look, we can talk about wellness. We can talk about better lives and all of that.
and they'll be the ones to sell it to us.
Also, BAT has kind of moved away from just straight
the
cigarettes,
traditional vapes and stuff.
and they've gone into
Vapes,
vapes, and that's
the
a whole
nicotine
trend.
pouches.
And all,
Yeah.
they're.
I think it's under them.
Is it under them? I
think so.
Because I don't
See?
I see they're just sponsoring
a buy.
the living
Everything.
smokes out of the Formula One.
Okay, so we're buying.
Yeah, we're buying.
Cool.
Okay,
Not
let's.
that we ethically agree with what they do, but we're here to make money, right?
First round. I heard you speaking a little bit about banks earlier on.
Oh, we just
I'll
did a
buy.
deep dive into financials.
Are you buying?
hey.
For sure, I'm
We
buying.
just did a deep dive into financials. Those are. Look, my only concern, and this is what I said about not wanting to buy at the top. It is at the top. That's 77 rand. It's touched 80 rand already this month. We are 5 days into the month. It's run 18%. But as Petri said, context, right?
So
It's-
I'm going to
it's-
teach you. I'm going to give you some sort of some day trading stuff, right?
Okay.
What do you do with a stock that's up 10% for the day?
Look at what it's done beyond the day. 'Cause one day is not.
All you have is today's information.
Okay.
Stock is up 10% for the day. All the other stocks in the sector is not. What do you do with that stock?
It's a good stock.
As
It
a
means
human
people.
being.
It
As
means
human,
people,
I'm buying.
people are positive. People are positive on the stock.
You're gonna be a trader. You buy the stock.
People are positive
Right?
on the stock. Yeah.
Because what most people are going to do is, it's gone too much. You're going to buy the other stocks and short this one because this one's run, this one's up only 1%. This one's up. There's something is happening.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So if the thing is moving, buy it. So yes, it's already up. But the point I'm trying to make here is you're saying I don't want to buy at the highs. Do you know this is the high?
Well,
Do you know it doesn't end 20% up for the
That's
day?
true.
Well,
That's true.
in recent times, I mean, the stock hasn't been at 80 Rand ever.
Cool. So there's no resistance.
Fair enough. That's a fair point. That's a fair
Right,
point.
so there's nothing to hold it down. There's no predetermined levels where sellers are going to come in
That's
and say,
fair.
this is where I got in last time.
That's
I'm happy
fair.
to break
Jimmy's
even.
got a risk profile.
That's fair.
We're starting to understand it.
Yeah.
So if you are buying into momentum, buy the winners, sell the losers. So one way of doing a bit of analysis, and it's deeply time consuming, but you look at all the stocks compared to each other, right? And you look at relatively to one another, which ones perform the strongest,
Yeah.
and you just buy the strongest ones.
Well, we're bullish on financial stocks. We're bullish on this, so we are putting this in the buy category.
Okay, perfect.
Cool.
I think maybe the last one we can look at is probably a family favorite. And I say family, and we are family. We buy cars.
Oh, the new listing. The new kid on the block.
New kids on the block.
There was that whole thing where we buy cars. We kind of had it fair valued around 25 to 28 Rand or whatever. I think we're at 27 Rand now. Where are we, Petri? 27.10.
Can I buy psilocybin instead?
Oh, yes. I spoke to Gabriel. I like that. So we buy cars. I want to see a first set of results. I want to see a first set of independence from Transaction Capital. There's a lot of, yes, we're positive about this. And you look at their month-to-month numbers or their quarterly reportings, and they are cycling through inventory at a really good rate. They are by far the biggest player in the used car space. But something in me just says, just wait a bit. I don't know what it is.
It's hard.
Give it
because
breathing
if
space.
you
Maybe
look-
maybe
if
it's
you
being
look at-
burnt by Transaction Capital.
Yeah, so Transaction Capital is one of those stocks that I was ultra bullish on. Made a lot of cash on it. At some point, it broke a trend line or whatever, and we sold it. And it's just caused pain, ever
suffering.
and suffering. And it went from like the darling to a steaming pile of
Something else.
something different. Right? And it's just the speed at which that happened was a bit shocking,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And essentially unbundling We Buy Cars kind of pseudo saved them, if you will, right?
But you also unbundled your most profitable asset, and now you're stuck with an SA taxi debt.
Which is cool, but at least we can buy the most profitable.
That's
asset.
it. That's it. This is why we're talking about that side.
My question
of it,
is that, like, I don't know, there's a lot of stuff that I don't know if you've bought a car from We Buy Cars or if you've sold a car to them. Have you got any experience like actually working with them?
Yeah. Done it
yeah.
briefly.
Yeah. I sold a vehicle to them and I bought a vehicle from them and I was very disappointed. I didn't get a roadworthy certificate.
Yeah.
Didn't get,
They're a bit-
There've been rumors around
So it's
that.
like, I'd
they need
rather
a bit
go
of
to the-
reputation management.
Maybe that's why I'm on the fence.
Yeah.
Maybe
Second-hand
that's why I'm
car
on the
salesmen
fence.
haven't got the best rep as
I'm
it is.
I'm
But
on
to be
the
fair,
fence
all the
about
cars
it.
that are on the road right now should tell you that We Buy Cars should be okay.
Yeah,
they are
because
basically
and people
where
aren't
they're gonna
buying
end
new
up.
cars.
Yeah,
People
yeah,
aren't buying new cars because new cars are a whole lot of different expense.
Absolutely agreed. I mean, if you wanted to buy a new Bucky,
Yeah.
it's like
expensive.
$1 million.
It's expensive.
It's mad.
No, it's expensive.
So yes, sure, there's a huge amount of growth potential for them, but in a situation where we actually, Simon said it earlier, shudder, get some economic growth.
Yeah.
What happens then? Do I want a second-hand car?
Okay.
I don't know. I'm a neutral on it.
Yeah, we're neutral on it.
I want to watch it, see what happens.
we're
Maybe this
neutral.
is a mistake. Maybe it's a blind buy. But I think for now, it has potential to be great. But let's just see it.
So what's your
for a
stance?
year
Are
or
you
two.
buying? Are you putting
No,
it
I'm
neutral?
neutral. Yeah, I'm not
You're
buying.
neutral and We Buy Cars.
I'm neutral. I think there's other things out there that you might find better value on. But
It's a bit
we'll
easier to understand. I mean,
Yeah,
some of
there's
the stuff that's
easier
freshly
things.
listed is that roll the dice.
Yeah.
It goes to the moon or
or
goes
it
to
doesn't.
the trash
Yeah.
can.
But
Like,
the
we don't
advantage
know.
to freshly listed things, of course, that we must disclose here is that you're getting in at historical lows. It's never been that low before because it hasn't existed.
That's true. Yeah.
It's one way of looking at it. If you want to find an upside, there's an upside. But that's all we have time for today. I wish we had more time. We're going to have to find and carve out more time for these conversations. Those out there, listening in, watching us and all of that, remember to follow and join our community page.
Yes, in the
Nicolette's
next
saying,
conversation, we must talk about these actively managed
Certificates.
exchange traded funds.
Oh, actively managed
actually, yeah.
ETFs.
Yeah, which is
Ooh.
quite interesting.
Okay, well, we'll add that to the list.
Yeah.
Join our community page for all our updates. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. What's the other one? The TikTok.
TikTok, please.
Find us on TikTok. We're gonna be on the TikTok. We're gonna do the TikTok thing.
Yes.
We'll be under Insider Exchange on all of them. Until next time, investing isn't hard. Just try it.